This series of talks that follow are about Bible prophecy. I'm not a prophet. I don't read the entrails of goats. I don't have special visions from God. Angels don't come and talk to me. The ability for me to understand things of the future depends upon what the Word of God has to say. The Word of God speaks copiously about the nation of Israel and the future events that will come to pass upon them. You know, we've just had in Australia devastating floods all across Queensland, New South Wales and in Victoria. The start of the year they issue the zodiac signs, the horoscopes for the people in the 12 different categories. It's interesting that not one of those who have horoscopes or predict these things predicted the floods. That's amazing, because these events would have had enormous consequences upon 1 in every 12 people that were in the flood. The greatest hotspot in the world is Israel. People are worried, very worried, that the difficulties in the Middle East will bring about another war, with the threat of nuclear bombs, with the threat of the massacre of millions of people. And what would the other nations of the world do if such an event took place? It would be catastrophic. However, the Bible teaches a lot and speaks a lot about the nation of Israel and their past, their present, and the future. Part of these talks is to look at what the Bible has to say about Israel and prophecy. Now, let me be quite plain from the outset. I neither favour Israel nor favour the Muslims. I do not condemn one and countenance the actions of the other. All I'm telling you is what the Bible has to say, and that's the important issue. The Bible, which is Jewish, of course, has got many, many, many prophecies about the future of Israel. Go to any other religion and ask, where are the Babylonian prophecies about the future of the Babylonians? Or the Assyrians and what their future will be? Or the Romans, or the Greeks, or any of those nations? They know many of them no longer exist. So why is it unique that the Bible, the Jewish book, predicts events of Israel 3,500 years before they came to pass? And that's the amazing thing that the Bible has to say. And we're going to look at, over a series of talks, some of these great prophecies, and they're not difficult. They're in plain, simple English, as we would say, English words, reading from the King James Bible. And I would ask you the question at the end, when I read these verses to you, what words in there don't you understand? Because they're plain, simple, and straightforward. Whether you accept them is another thing. So what we'll do, we'll look at one of the prophecies of Israel that go back 3,500 years. And it's firstly contained for us in the 28th chapter of the book of Deuteronomy. Moses is about to die. The children of Israel are about to enter the promised land under Joshua. Moses gives his last words of encouragement to the nation as they're about to enter the land. And he says to them, if you do the right thing and keep God's commandments, all these blessings will come upon you. If you do the wrong thing and turn away from God, then all these curses will come upon you. So we find that we get to the 28th chapter and he says, if you do the wrong things, then the following things will happen to you. And he tells us, particularly, and I have to read from my Bible here for you so I can get the words exactly right. He says in the 49th verse of that chapter, "The Lord will bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand, a nation of fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favour to the young." And he will come in, as the rest of the chapter goes on to explain, he will devastate you. He will kill you. He'll do all sorts of terrible things to you. He then says that after that happens, the nation of a fierce countenance comes upon them, that the nation will be scattered. And he tells us that in verse 64 of the same chapter. "And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people, from one end of the earth even to the other. And there thou shalt serve other gods which thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. And among these nations shalt thou find no ease, neither shall the sole of thy foot have rest. But the Lord shall give thee there a trembling heart, a failing of eyes, and sorrow of mind." Now, that was said of Israel 3,500 years ago. What does history tell us? It tells us that 1,500 years after Moses spoke those words and they were penned, these events happened. The Romans, under the Roman eagle, they came into the land, they destroyed the land, they destroyed the temple, they murdered or killed hundreds of thousands of Jews, took hundreds of thousands of them into captivity, sold them as slaves, and decreed that the temple should never be built again and that the Jews were not to return to the land. And the following 2,000 years of history have shown that wherever the Jew or the Israelite has gone into other lands, then inevitably he finds no rest. He gets persecuted from country to country through different ages under different rulers. Sometimes they have prosperity, but mostly they are persecuted until the great persecution of the 20th century, in which 6 million Jews throughout Europe perished, scattered among every land and slaughtered by their millions. How did Moses know that? Unless he was given insight by the Spirit of God, and these words are the words of God to confirm the message that Moses was to bring, that the children of Israel ought to follow the Lord their God, not depart from him, else these terrible things would happen to them. In our following talks, we'll look at some other prophecies that relate not to only to their being scattered, but to what would be their fortunes while they lived in other lands and the ultimate outcome that God's purpose is with those people.